It's the kind of story that outrages the public. A serial sex offender is released from custody, and less than a year later, he's accused of viciously raping a woman in her own home. The case of Essie Billingslea has caused an outcry, and it also raises serious questions about what should happen to sex offenders after they've served their sentence. By most accounts, 45-year-old Essie Billingslea's criminal history should have kept him in jail. In 1986, forcible rape of a 14-year-old girl. In 1989, forcible rape of a 13-year-old girl. In 1995, rape and abuse of an 11-year-old girl. After serving a 10-year sentence, the state continued to hold Billingslea at Bridgewater, labeling him a Level 3 sex offender and most likely to reoffend. But last year, a Suffolk County jury disagreed, finding Billingslea no longer sexually dangerous, and he was discharged in March 2013. Now Billingslea is back in custody, accused of breaking into an Arlington home Sunday evening and brutally raping a woman at knife point. Now facing his fourth rape charge, Billingslea has pled not guilty. My next guest has represented Level 3 sex offenders. Jack Kuna is a criminal defense attorney and a partner at the Boston law firm Kuna Holcomb. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, Jack, just looking at this guy's criminal background, did it surprise you that a jury would let him go?
Juries actually are probably more likely to release so-called STPs, sexually dangerous persons, than judges are. You know, they're asked to, I think, make a very difficult decision about whether or not somebody is going to commit a crime in the future. That's not usually the way we conduct business in this country. You commit a crime and you're punished, and this is the only area, really, where there's sexually orientated crimes where somebody is held afterwards, and they're held one day to life. They get a life sentence.
I know. I hear from some of them who are in Bridgewater. Well, let's bring someone else into the discussion. Robert Mendoza. He's a forensic psychologist and owner of Boston Forensic Associates. So, Robert, on that point, how do you look into the future and determine whether somebody is going to commit a crime again? I know they have these evaluators. I do hear from a lot of people in Bridgewater, and they have these evaluators who come in. They all tell me that these guys are a joke. I mean, I don't know if they are or not, but, you know, they're swimming around that system forever and ever and ever, and it's to their benefit to say that they're dangerous, so most of them do get held there. But how do you determine that?
First of all, there are a number of factors that you can look at, and I say if you look at all these things at the end of the day, there's still only a percentage chance of a little over chance, maybe 60 or 70% of the time you're going to be correct, which means that 30, maybe 40% of the time you're just wrong about it. But generally, you can look at things that have to do with age, at which time what they're going to be released. The older, less likely. You look at the sexual offense history. You look at their sexual deviant proclivities. You look at their general criminality. You look at the relationship to the offender. Those 5 categories are typically the things that you look at in an evaluation. But again, at the end of the day, these are actuarial measures. They determine statistically whether or not you look like the pool of people that will then go on to reoffend or not. That's a statistical likelihood based on an average group of people that might or might not be similar to the offender in question.
Actually, as I understand it, the recidivism rate, that is people who reoffend for people who've committed violent crimes, no, just violent crimes, is about 40%. And for people who committed sexual offenses, it's only 22%. And not all those are sexual offenses. In other words, the recidivism rate actually for people who have committed sexual offenses and have actually undergone treatment for it at the treatment center, so-called, it's really a prison. It's a prison, okay? But their recidivism rate is actually about half. So, you know, what are you going to do? And this is a horrible thing that happened and horribly frightening to everyone. But are you going to kill everybody? Are you going to say, well, or you're going to give everybody a life sentence and say you can't get out? It's an imperfect
I mean,
it's an imperfect decision-making process because it has to be.
A lot of people say
necessity.
This is double jeopardy anyway, because these people have served their criminal sentences. Then they get sent to Bridgewater for this evaluation. Then they're determined whether they're likely to offend. In fact, the statistics are quite stunning. Very few people actually get out after between 2010 and 2012, 83 convicts sought release after their sentences were up, but only 26 were granted release. So 57, almost 70% were denied. And those are the people I hear from, the ones that were denied.
Once they get you, it's hard to get out.
Yeah, never. I mean, most of these people will never get out.
It is. And I work primarily for attorneys representing people trying to get out.
Yeah.
But I have to sort of stick up a little bit for the qualified examiners and for some of the system. The reason it's hard to treat, I mean, you just mentioned the recidivism rate is, in fact, much lower for sex offenders than it is violent non-sex offenders. And to some extent, you'd have to credit at least some of the impact that sex offender treatment can have. The reason that it has such a negative view in general, I think, the public is if we can't cure violent recidivism and it's at that high rate, then we can't expect treatment for sex offenders to be zero when they get out either. And to that end, as you just mentioned, around 2/3 of people that seek to leave don't, because at the end of the day, they find that these individuals are not individuals that would be safe. What I think is really important, and we've talked about this before with regard to criminal recidivism and so on, we know what we can do for people re-entering to decrease that risk of offense. The job they go to, the house that they live in, the community that they go to, and the treatment that they get, if we can do a better job on that end, then the recidivism rate, in fact, can be lower, and we do have control over that.
Not to be too graphic about this, but one of the things that I think about all the time is that these guys have no healthy contact sexually with anybody except other inmates. There's no other, so our society doesn't permit that. So how are you going to cure somebody of having some kind of a sexual problem when there's no way to integrate them?
I think that there's something to be said for that, although as with a lot of violent crime, it's not so much the sex as it is the obsession. And that's what's hard to predict. There are a number of people who are obsessive, and it leads them to commit crimes. Yeah. The only ones that we, however, give a life sentence to after they serve their time are the ones who have committed sex crimes. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. Rape isn't about sex; it's about violence, and that's the problem is that it's really not about sex. It's about compulsion, and it's about the inability to control that compulsion. Mm-hmm. And some can, and some can't.
I think that you actually hit on the most difficult part of assessing somebody. Someone's in jail for 20 years. Their last offense was 20 years ago. The actuarials can take into account some of that, but not a lot of it. If you've committed a sexual offense 20 years ago, one or two, it's very hard to look after 20 years and then say, now, where is this person at now?
Yeah, I don't know how they do it. All right. Robert Mendoza, Jack Kuna, as always, thanks.
Pleasure.